Now, in a world where global capital is becoming scarcer and more selective, Africa faces both urgency and opportunity in shaping its own path to financial sovereignty. With tariffs on the rise and the need to mobilize domestic resources and deepen regional integration has been greater. At the heart of these conversations is the Africa Financial Summit, which will bring together over 1,200 decision makers in Morocco next month. Joining me to discuss what the current backdrop means for the continent's financial future is Secretary General of the AFIS Supervisory Council, Olivier Noel. Olivier, thanks so much for your time today. Now, as mentioned, right, we in a moment where the global economy is tightening, very uncertain times where tariffs are rising again. Now, against this backdrop, how do you see Africa positioning itself to safeguard growth and financial sovereignty?
A lot, and Taolang, and delighted to be with you and your viewers in Johannesburg. This was my base for a few years, so I'm in very familiar terrain. So back to your question, the reason that we've chosen for this edition of AFIS, which is the 5th edition of this event, which has become over the years probably the largest platform grouping together professionals, both public sector regulators and private sector, of Africa's financial industry. The reason we've chosen to focus on African capital is precisely because of the environment. As you said, this is a space and time where essentially there's a drying up of overseas development assistance to Africa in particular. A lot of risk aversion on the part of global capital markets for emerging market destinations, including Africa. And there is the time to probably focus so much more on how we can harness the capital that is actually out there, whether it be with the life insurers, whether it be with the sovereign funds, whether it be with other institutional investors in Africa. So that's going to be one of the key themes of this edition of the Africa Financial Summit. As you said, it's hosted in Morocco for the second year running, because Morocco is probably one of the countries with South Africa, in fact, that has really reached a level of maturity in terms of financial depth and inclusion, and strength of precisely its institutional investors that today drive a lot of investment, domestic investment, to strategic sectors, infrastructure, power, renewables, and so on. That we think there's elements of showcase of what's been done well in those mature markets that speak volumes for other African countries.
Now, let's talk about capital in greater detail, Olivier. You've said that Africa can no longer rely solely on external sources of finance. What would it take to politically and, I guess, institutionally mobilize domestic capital at the scale needed for industries like infrastructure and energy?
The big challenge that Africa has faced so far, it's probably the fact that it's a very fragmented market, and a collection of relatively subscale financial sectors. If you take Francophone West Africa, for instance, or Francophone Central Africa, they're grouped within one single common currency and common monetary zone, and that's really provided a major buffer, during this sort of crisis period. But also, it's allowed both sovereigns, if you take the bond market, domestic sovereign issuers, and also corporates to tap the market regionally. So rather than being, a pure, say, Ivorian sovereign that issues paper to your domestic investors, you have a platform of 8 countries that are essentially your market. To some extent, this is also the case in SADC. So the idea is very much to see how we can foster those integrations and have those debates done not just by private sector participants, but also by the many regulators that will be attending and that typically attend the forum.
So we'll be bringing...
Sorry.
It's okay. We'll be bringing together, I guess, different stakeholders from the private sector as well as regulators, and also representatives of government. And that's important because we do know that unlocking capital isn't straightforward, especially when savings pools, right, when savings pools are still shallow, and mobilizing pension and insurance funds is often raised as a solution, right? But in a continent where households and savings are limited, how do we design regulations that unlock capital without overburdening citizens? And of course, that key, considering that regulators will be in attendance.
It's a very, very fair point, Taolang. If you take, for instance, the insurance space, which is a large pool of domestic savings that can be mobilized for long-dated, long-term financings, including infrastructure, by the way. Yeah. The two markets that really have dominated the space are South Africa and Morocco. This is two markets where the levels of insurance inclusion, as a ratio to GDP, are actually very significant. Bar these two markets, the average for Sub-Saharan Africa in terms of insurance inclusion is around 3%. So 3% of households are integrated into the insurance industry. So there's a lot of headroom, to mobilize those savings. I mean, there's an emerging middle class in many countries of our continent. So the question is more, how do you grow that insurance inclusion? How do you make sure that, say, life products are relatively fluid and accessible? And then how do you make sure that this pool of domestic savings are then harnessed for productive industries and projects? This is the match which, in a sense, has been difficult to make. So anything that regionally or continentally can support, those tools of mobilization of domestic savings is actually critical.
And Olivier, talk to me about the private sector players that will be in attendance. We do know that sectors like energy, logistics, and natural resources are still dominated by international players. Are we seeing some sort of a transfer of skills? Is anything being done, in a sense, to create concrete steps when it comes to building African champions in those sectors?
In terms, from the lens of the financial industry, which are the participants to the Africa Financial Summit, the key question will be, how do you make sure that when you're a large commercial bank, say in Nigeria, you become so much more of a player in those sectors that require long-dated finance, energy, renewables, telecoms. By and large, I would say the Pan-African banks and the larger banks on the continent, irrespective of international affiliates, already play a significant role. They rely from time to time on the development finance partners for guarantees, credit enhancement, but essentially they've already grown their own skill set and own teams. As we see what's called the Darius King, of international banks out of Africa to continue, this is actually an opportunity for homegrown banks to grow their structured finance capacities, their ability to be the lead agents of funding of those critical sectors of the economy.
And it's just not about those big players, right? The SME story is just as critical for jobs and resilience. Talk to me about how, I guess, local stock exchanges and fintech platforms be transformed into real engines of capital formation for SMEs rather than, serving mostly larger corporates.
If you look at it's a very fair point as well, Taolang. If you look at the makeup of companies that are listed today, by and large, they're large, domestic or regional corporates or international corporates, multinationals. The layer of mid-caps, mid-sized companies, remains to be strengthened. It's very much a case of, if you look at those companies, they tend to be family-owned businesses, founder-owned businesses. To take them to the capital market and to take them to list, it takes a bit of an educational effort, and it takes also for those stock markets to become larger, trade larger volumes, be more liquid. So the initiatives to interconnect African stock exchanges are the Pan-African initiatives that will actually make it possible to list many more companies that are mid-sized companies today, but essentially can be the largest size, champions of tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's been very interesting to see how big banks have also been contributing to that. Here in South Africa, I do know of Standard Bank really pushing to fund those mid-sized companies, those family businesses. So it's been an interesting development to see. All right, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Olivier, thanks so much for your time, and we'll be sure to see you next month in Morocco. Now, that was the Secretary General of AFIS Supervisory Council, Olivier Noel.
Thanks so much.